This podcast was produced from a webinar. For a more interactive experience with visuals, visit myamericannurse.com/webinars.
And we'll get started with Something's Afoot, foot health in nursing and beyond. Our objectives today are to review the nursing profession's impacts on foot health. We're going to examine common diseases and how they impact foot health, and discuss foot care as a specialty field. So some people don't think of this as a specialty field, but it certainly is, and it's an emerging field, especially for nursing. So with foot health, it contributes to our overall health in a number of different ways. It's a really complex structure. We have 26 bones, there are 33 joints connected with ligaments, we have tendons connected to muscles, and all of those things have to work together and work properly to allow for the function of the foot, to carry us around and to not create painful movement. Our feet carry us an average of 115,000 miles in our lifetime. I was thinking about the song, I would walk 500 miles. I would walk 115,000 miles in my lifetime for you. So our feet are also our point of contact with the earth, right? When we just think about it, they're the ones that have to acclimate to the terrain. If our feet can't adjust properly to differences in terrain, we're going to be unsteady and we're going to have an increased risk of falls. The number one cause of injuries and death for older Americans are falls. And our healthy feet, in combination with proper footwear for those feet, have been associated with a reduced risk of falls. And there's actually a lot of research that demonstrates that. When we look at research on Americans and how we care for our feet, some perform care regularly. The majority of Americans will, at a minimum, trim their toenails, which is great, but less than half adhere to any other foot care regimens. That's about the bottom line for it. For foot care for people going above trimming their toenails, women tend to do it more than men. Young people tend to do it more than older people. And 80% of people actually report having a foot problem. And there's some different prevalences of that, but it's all about the 80% range. 70 to 80% of people have foot problems. Of those people that report foot problems, 50% report that foot problem impacts their quality of life. Foot access to foot care is really important. It can prevent complications. If we think about the toenails we saw in the previous slide and how those can be very uncomfortable, that they can be rubbing into the adjacent nail and causing wounds in addition to pain, calluses, that type of a thing. It can prevent falls, like we talked about. So it really improves our quality of life. It decreases pain. And this is something where we want to increase access for everybody, not just nurses, but all of our patients across the board. When we have foot pain, it impacts our whole life. It can restrict our mobility. So we're thinking about our cardiovascular health, how we're able to still participate in cardiovascular exercise when we're not able to be on our feet is very challenging. It can impact our sleep. I think, even when I have a very mild amount of pain, it interferes with my sleep. So people with moderate to severe foot pain, really, it can impair their sleep quite a bit. It can impair our work. So we'll talk a little bit in terms of nursing, but certainly if you have a job where you have to be on your feet a majority of the day, or you don't have ideal access for, knee scooters and things like that, it can impair our access to work and our ability to work. And then, a lot of us also stand for long periods of time. So we need to be able to tolerate that. For foot health and nursing, most nurses take at least 9,000 steps per shift. And that tracks. When I used to work at our urban academic medical center, that's about what I would do per shift. And then I was younger at the time, trying to be healthy. I would also take the stairs instead of the elevator up and down. So then it was actually above that. But that equals about 5 to 9 miles per day just at work. And that doesn't include all of the things that we do outside of work, living our best lives, right? We also have prolonged walking and prolonged standing, and those are going to impact our lower extremities in different ways. Ultimately, nurses spend 80 to 90% of shift on their feet. And so taking care of our feet is really important, and making sure that we have the correct setup and the correct activities that we're doing to help promote that. They've studied foot health and the nursing profession, and what they found were that, of course, bedside nurses report higher levels of foot pain than other types of nurses, which makes sense if you're on your feet more and you're walking more, that you'd be more susceptible to the types of problems that cause foot pain. People with foot pain switch jobs more than those without foot pain. And this should make all of the executives and administrators' ears perk up, because this is, an evidence-based finding that people are switching jobs. So this is a significant cost for hospitals, for corporations, when people are switching jobs. And to know that foot pain affects people's ability to stay in certain jobs and their desire to stay in certain jobs. Longer working hours are also associated with higher levels of pain. So as we're standing on our feet throughout the day, we're walking more throughout the day. If we continue to have longer and longer shifts, we're going to accumulate more foot pain throughout the day. And foot pain begins an average of about 7 hours into our workday. So what can we do for nurses to help prevent foot pain? Well, the first is to protect your feet, right? And you can start by making sure that you have the correct footwear. We want supportive footwear that's comfortable. And what does that look like? What does that mean? It means arch support. So we don't want something that just looks completely flat in terms of the insole. I'm not talking about high heels here, because that's not good either. And you can actually be fitted for footwear. So if you go to, some footwear stores and things, they can measure your foot appropriately, because footwear that is too small and too large can contribute to foot pain. Proper footwear can actually improve your lower extremity circulation. So it can prevent some musculoskeletal disorders, prevent the vascular disease, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. And the most common solution for nurses to relieve and to prevent foot pain is through footwear. So that's usually when you get foot pain, that's the first thing that you try and do, is buy a new pair of shoes that are hopefully more supportive, more comfortable. And if your footwear isn't quite doing it, the next step is to really enhance those with orthotics. So if you look at these foot positionings over on the left, we can see how really subtle changes in the positioning of our bony structure affects our foot position. And when you're taking 115,000 miles of steps in your lifetime, and you have even very subtle changes in your foot position, it can lead over time to repetitive injury and stress. What orthotics can do is try and correct for some of these variations in foot positioning. So you can see a typical kind of an orthotic over on the right there, how we're getting some arch support. It's a little bit of foam padding to get better support during each step. And so this is really step number one if you're having foot pain that's not resolved with new footwear. Another thing that I recommend doing is circulation, is supporting your circulation. So what does this look like? It looks like leg elevation. What I always tell patients, and nurses are patients too, is to elevate your legs. It works best if it's above the level of your heart, so that you're not still working against gravity. But elevating them at least some. It doesn't have to be all day, but 10 to 15 minutes 3 times a day can help with circulation and getting that swelling out of your legs. We also recommend mild to moderate knee-high compression stockings to start out with, unless if you have some other medical condition where you need thigh highs, or if you're wearing knee-high compression stockings and you get that kind of like lower thigh bulge because you're pushing all the swelling fluid out of your lower extremity, your calf, and then it's pooling in your thigh. And sometimes that can be very uncomfortable for people. So then you can go for a thigh high stocking, or they make actually maternity tights are pretty good because they provide a little bit of abdominal support too, but also they're going to help move that fluid all the way up out of the thigh as well. And they're not super duper tight. So again, barring you have any other medical condition where you need a higher level of compression, you can start out with 5 to 10 millimeters of mercury. If you're buying these online, I always recommend looking for the brands that actually have the amount, the millimeters of mercury. Just like when you take a blood pressure and the sphygmomanometer is showing you, 120 over 80, that's the same measurement that we do for compression. So we're looking for a squeeze of 5 to 10 starting out with. And if you can do more or you need more, it certainly can go up. The next step is usually 10 to 20, and then 20 to 30, and then 30 to 40, which is our medical grade therapeutic amount of compression that we use for people with existing venous disease and venous leg ulcers and things like that. So, a lot of us are at increased risk for venous disease developing, and I think using compression stockings preventatively is certainly something to consider. I'm a wound specialist, so in the wound center, whenever we're telling people to use compression stockings, we all proudly pull up our pant leg and say, see, now we're doing it. Nearly everybody in the wound clinic is wearing compression stockings because we see the advanced problems that come from having venous disease over time, having that lower extremity swelling. It's not just uncomfortable and painful or, doesn't look necessarily as cosmetic as you'd like. It can actually lead to dermatitis and wounds. It's also important to stretch and perform calf exercises. So if you're standing for a long period of time and sitting for a long period of time, or just intermittently throughout the day, we want to stretch and perform calf exercises. This is something that I do when I'm on an airplane, when I'm at my desk, whenever I think about it. If there's a commercial playing and I'm watching TV, I'm always doing ankle rotation. So just moving your feet around in circles, flexing them, pointing them, flexing them, pointing them. And what you're trying to do is squeeze that calf muscle, because the calf muscle acts like a heart in your legs and it pumps the fluid back out of your leg. So doing these calf exercises can help with circulation. And then you're also moving your tendon and ligaments and helping, with stretching and things like that. When you're doing this, you're helping circulate the blood. So it's not just standing there, contacting the edge of the blood vessels, which can cause a DVT over time, which is why people get deep vein thromboses on airplanes and things. They're dehydrated, so they have less of a blood volume. And then they're sitting, and they're not, they're not moving that fluid, and the blood is just pooling in the extremities. So we want to prevent blood clots. And then also we want to prevent or treat any phlebolymphodema, which is the new term. It doubles for, venous lymphedema and just pure lymphedema. So how we talked about all of these things, we have our leg elevations. We know that nurses that have foot pain are going to leave their positions more frequently than nurses without, and that foot pain starts before the end of even the shortest standard shift time. I think a great opportunity, so they're not just giving us keychains or, a pen or something, would be to have break time foot care kits. If you're thinking of something to recommend for them to support you or to support your staff, I think having some nice foot care kits would be great. They make little massagers that people can put their feet on, having a place where people can elevate their extremities appropriately, having signage on ankle exercises, maybe giving people some light compression stockings, something like that is a really good idea to help support nursing and their foot health. So these are generalized foot care recommendations, and this is what we're teaching patients, but it's good for us to follow as well, right? So we want people to be washing their feet thoroughly every day, which sounds basic, but people aren't doing it, right? You have to dry your feet then, and especially dry them between our toes, We know that fungus like it warm and wet, and so make sure that the in between the toes are very dry. And then we can moisturize everywhere except between our toes to make sure that we're keeping our skin moisture barrier intact. We like our toenails to be trimmed, and to check the feet. So for people, especially people with diabetes or peripheral arterial disease, to make sure that they're looking at their feet every day. And if they don't have the ability, the flexibility, the dexterity to be able to look at the whole foot, including the bottom of the foot, people they'll use a mirror, first of all, or they'll put a mirror on like a spatula or something, and then they can just, whip it down there and take a peek. Because if you have neuropathy and you can't feel your feet, you need to be looking and just making sure that there's not anything brewing. We recommend that people wear moisture wicking socks, so things that will keep their feet dry and warm, and help manage moisture, but don't have seams. So diabetic socks are good for people, again, with neuropathy or other foot issues, because they don't have the hard seams that can cause injuries. Before we put shoes on, we want people to look in there and make sure there's nothing in there that would rub or cut. Wearing the correct size shoes. So how you can get fitted for footwear, we want to make sure that footwear isn't too small or too big. A lot of people think, oh, well, I don't want it to rub, so I'm just going to get the next size up. But then as we're walking, it can actually shake around and cause rubbing and calluses and wounds just from being too big as well. So we recommend wearing the shoes around the house for people with foot problems, they have blood flow problems or they can't feel their feet. Because if they're bumping their toes, into the table, into the chair, into what have you, at least the shoe is going to protect that. Because a lot of times people get minor trauma and then non-healing wounds from having exposed feet. Don't soak your feet, and then quit smoking, of course. So peripheral arterial disease is, the number one cause of lower extremity amputations in combination with diabetes, of non-traumatic amputations. So quitting smoking is kind of step number one in limiting your peripheral arterial disease risk. And we'll get into the fun foot pictures now. So some common foot issues. We have plantar fasciitis is very common. It's very common in the public, but it's very common for nurses as well. Ingrown toenails, bone spurs, and that goes along with plantar fasciitis. Hyperhidrosis and odor. Hammer toes and bunions are very common. And then callus and blistering. So like we have this photo over on the left there. Now this was a callus from rubbing over a bony prominence on the side of the foot, and then ended up blistering just from that continued callus. Now callus is an excess of keratin. Our body builds that up in response to stress to the area, repetitive trauma, but it actually increases the pressure underneath there. So when you have a callus and you keep rubbing, it can lead to, again, blistering and wounds. Toenail disorders are the most common foot problem in the elderly, especially. And that is because as we get older, it's harder for us to care for our feet for a number of different reasons. One, we have more problems with our feet to begin with. We have a lot of comorbid diseases that happen, and then we get more pharmaceuticals to treat those diseases. So if we have arthritis and we can't get down to our feet, our eyes, poor vision, it's hard to see the problems in our feet or see our nail edge to be able to trim it safely. Unfortunately, body habitus plays into it quite often. The obesity rate is, 47% in a lot of areas. And so just being able to physically get over that tissue to be able to reach our feet can be very difficult and prohibitive a lot of the time. And then arthritic problems, dexterity, and of course, mental decline. So do we even see it as an issue, period? Is this even a concern, or are you able to follow the directions to safely take care of your feet? One of the nail problems that we see is called a paronychia. So here we have an example here. It's an infection a small abscess in the subcutaneous tissue at the nail base. So we can see that some wound drainage there from where it's open and draining. This can be very, very painful. If you feel your feet, this can be very painful. You don't necessarily always need antibiotics for it. You usually don't need antibiotics for it. If you come to a foot provider, we treat it by, placing a small scalpel or a needle into the abscess and draining it. And usually that's enough to treat this. And we can see with this photo here, the patient also has a coexisting onychomycosis. So they have a fungal nail infection, and that's probably contributing to the inflammation and the paronychia that we see. Nail trimming is, like we talked about, a really difficult problem for some people. Now, when we are trimming people's toenails, if that's something that's within your scope and something that you've been trained to do, or you're teaching someone how to do it properly, we want to avoid situations and using tools that can cause injury, that will cause the patient to bleed, or certainly contribute to any wounds. And when people have nail conditions like that hallux, that great toenail in the photo there, it's difficult to tell where the live nail is and the edge of the nail is, because it's thickened and it's discolored, and there's something called subungual debris, which is just junk underneath the toenail. So all of that combined makes it really difficult to see where the toenail actually ends. And if we're trimming it and we don't know, we can cause injury. We can go into the live nail. We can cause bleeding. So with people on anticoagulants, that can be dangerous for them. And if we cause wounds, we know people with diabetes, with peripheral arterial disease, they may not be able to heal those wounds. We also want to avoid fomenting any ingrown toenails. So that's when we tell people, we want to trim it straight across. We don't want to trim it in a circle, or even if we see, some nail along the edges, we don't want to trim down into that edge of the nail, because that can contribute to an ingrown nail. We also don't want to trim it too close to the live nail edge. So we're looking at like 1/16 of an inch to 1/8 of an inch. From the end of the toe, and then smooth any of those corner edges, or maybe at the very edge, but certainly the corners. We smooth them with an emery board or something similar, so that those sharp little corners aren't cutting them. And we leave the cuticles, which is surprising to some of us that have been getting pedicures our whole lives, right? Because they're always shoving those things back. But we want to leave the cuticles. They're an anatomic, natural structure that's actually a function. It functions to protect the nail root. And when you're shoving those cuticles back, you're shoving bacteria and fungus in there too. And how we looked at the paronychia, that is an excellent way to give yourself a paronychia. Those are associated with unclean, improperly sterilized or cleaned equipment for pedicures. So for patients at home, patients with a increased risk of foot problems, we leave the cuticles alone. Hammer toes is another really common issue. So this is an abnormal bend in the middle joint. I actually have these because I did ballet on point when I was young. Couldn't do it now. But shoving your foot and squishing them, and then walking on just the tips of your toes, all my toes are all squished. And so I have hammer toes. Now, this can also happen from diabetes. In addition to sensory neuropathy, people with diabetes get motor neuropathy, where their tendons shrink up on the top and the bottom, and it causes that kind of claw-shaped deformity where you can get wounds on the tips of your toes, and also on the your bottom of your toe, because now it's not facing straight forward, it's facing the ground. So this is a claw-like position, and it can be painful if you don't have neuropathy. And it's, again, caused by improper footwear. So even if you're not shoving your foot into a point shoe, high-heeled footwear, any footwear that's too short, too narrow, too tight, can contribute to this. To reiterate, people with diabetes and peripheral arterial disease are at increased risk for problems with their feet, for foot infections, and for amputation. Unskilled care in these populations can lead to wounds, which leads to infections, osteomyelitis, so infection of the bone, and amputations. Amputations are also associated with increased mortality, so it actually can shorten their lifespan. They have low blood flow, including not just the big blood vessels, their macrovessels, but also their microvessels are diseased. So they get low blood flow to their skin. And you can see on that photo on the left there, that's from peripheral arterial disease. And they've actually, their hallux, their great toenail, has fallen off just because of a lack of blood supply, and maybe some minor trauma or something, but really just from lack of blood supply. And what you're looking at is a wound underneath there. The nail bed has some moist eschar and slough over it. When you have diabetes and low blood flow, your microbiome is disrupted. So you're more likely to have an infection, and you're more likely for that infection to be a more virulent infection. So we want to be really careful providing nail care, foot care for those populations. Here's another example of callus and blistering. So we can see a callus over a bony prominence. Now, if you don't have neuropathy, if you're feeling your feet, this is going to be very painful. So if you're, doing a lot of walking, more walking than normal, making sure that you choose the right footwear, that you're getting some inserts and trying them out beforehand and make sure that they're going to work for you is really important. Plantar fasciitis. So in medicine, we like to find fancy names for things, right? But it's just descriptive. Plantar means the bottom of your foot, and then your fascia, and then the itis. So your fascia is what's, over your muscles, your tendons, and then the itis, the inflammation. So the plantar fascia run along the bottom of our feet. You can see from that illustration on the left that they're connected to our calcaneus, our heel bone, and all the way up to our toes. And when those become inflamed, and when they become irritated from overuse, from improper footwear, it pulls on the heel bone, and it can, cause a lot of pain across the bottom of the foot. For treatment for this, we look at RICE, which is rest, ice, compression, and elevation, right? They make little compression footies that don't have toes, and they only go up through the ankle. That you can buy online, but those can be a good place to start for a little relief and support for this issue. Some people get corticosteroid injections for, whether you're into that or not. There's some mild to maybe moderate evidence, but people like to try laser therapy. There's dry needling and special kinds of taping for support and blood flow that can be done to help with the pain for this. And then NSAIDs are really, really common, and acetaminophen, so over-the-counter pain medication. Just keep in mind, if you're taking over-the-counter NSAIDs, if you take them for a long period of time, that can cause kidney and heart problems and stomach problems. And so if this is something that you're dealing with and it's not going away, I would recommend seeing a foot specialist for that. Also with NSAIDs, if you're taking them at lower dosages, it's mostly just for pain. It's not until we get into the prescriptive doses that we really see an impact on inflammation. We also recommend lifestyle modification. So getting back to our foot and our calf workouts, there are specialized exercises for plantar fasciitis. We need you to wear supportive footwear. They make orthotic inserts that are specific to this issue. And if you're doing all of this, 20 to 75% no longer have symptoms 1 year after onset. So that's based on variable interventions and your foot and, your work schedule and things like that. But there is a good chance that this can resolve if you're resolving the issue that's causing it, right? One of the sequelae, so one of the things that happens from plantar fasciitis are bone spurs. So look at this x-ray over on the left there, and we can see the calcaneus bone on the right, that big bone in the middle on the right-hand side, and how at the very right-hand side of the picture, it's not a flat edge to that bone. It's got a little projection out there, and that's the bone spur. That's where the Achilles tendon from our calf comes and inserts into the calcaneus. And it's been inflamed and injured so much from plantar fasciitis and from, tendonitis and repetitive injury, that it's actually calcified and made these bone spurs. And we can see the same bone spur happening on the bottom of that calcaneal bone. That it's not a round surface. It has that little projection that sticks out. And that's the bone spur from the plantar fasciitis, from the plantar fascia along the bottom of the foot inserting there. And we can see that just from repeated stress, repeated injury, that the inflammation has led to a calcification of that tendon, that bone spur, the fascia. And this is very, very painful. So this is why when you're having plantar fascial pain and it's not going away, you don't want to just, deal with it. If it's not going away, you should really see a foot expert, because we want to prevent these kind of long-term sequelae from happening. People for increased risk of plantar fasciitis and bone spurs are obese people. So for every 10 pounds of weight gain, it has a exponential increase in the amount of pressure for each foot, step that you're taking. So the weight and the force of you during ambulation multiplies. The type of footwear that you're using is really important. I know we've been, talking about that a lot. Standing and exercising. So the type of exercise that you're doing, the amount of standing you're doing during the day. If you have flat feet, and then high-heeled shoes. If you've ever seen an x-ray of a foot in a high-heeled shoe, you would think, oh my God, I can't believe that how many people walk around with their foot in that kind of non-anatomical position for the majority of the day. So we have all these different foot problems. There's a lot of ways to help people to prevent them, to treat them, to prevent long-term problems and pain, increase their quality of life. And one of the ways to do that is to become a certified foot care nurse. A CFCN, a certified foot care nurse, is an accredited foot care educational program. You need to have an RN licensure, a bachelor's degree or higher. There are 25 CEUs from that accredited foot care education. And then we have you do 40 clinical hours with a foot care expert, and those have specific designations of who can do that. And that's to make sure that you've really seen and experienced the variety of patient situations that you may encounter. Foot care as a specialty field is really in demand, and that demand is growing. We know that demand for podiatrists is expected to increase by 29% by 2030, but that we're having lower amounts of the people able to do that. So shortages are absolutely expected in foot care. And keep in mind, these days we always want to think what jobs are going to be available in 10 years from now, because what's happening in healthcare now is going to be very different from the setting 10 years from now. Foot care is a manual task, which makes it more more protected from AI. So this is something that people are always going to be needing you to do in the future. We have an aging population. We have an increased amount of diabetes. And so we really have a need for foot care as a specialty. Foot care, as far as a specialty field for nursing, it's a big time entrepreneurship opportunity. You have to check your state nurse practice back, but foot care is one of the few areas in RN can be self-employed. So many certified foot care nurses open their own foot care clinics. Now you can do that, through a hospital and still be, employed and maybe just open up a clinic with your hospital. A lot of people will have their own LLCs or such a thing, and go to long-term care facilities, to assisted living facilities, community centers, senior centers, etc., and provide foot care for people. So in conclusion, foot health is tied to our overall quality of life. It's not just, something that doesn't impact our ability to exercise, etc. Nurses are predisposed to foot problems. We do a lot of standing, we do a lot of walking, and therefore we're at increased risk for an already very common issue. Proper foot care can prevent and limit many common foot issues. And remember that we want to be wearing supportive footwear, using orthotics if we need to, And then starting out with some compression stockings. It can be mild compression stockings, but that can be very helpful as well. So here are my references. I always like to make sure that what I'm saying is supported by evidence and that that evidence is as recent as it could be. And with that, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you learned something. I hope you have some ideas, some patients you may have recently seen, like, oh, that's what was going on with their feet, that type of a thing. And we have some time for questions. So I think we'll start taking questions. And I have one, what orthotics do you recommend for nurses? So orthotics can be specialized to whatever your foot care problem is. If you know if that's been diagnosed already or you know what that is, you can look specifically for that foot problem. But you can also get generalized orthotics that are gonna, add more cushioning if you're doing running versus walking, that type of a thing. And then a lot of pharmacies have actually automated machines like mats that you can step on, and it'll, take a look at your foot distribution with your weight, and will give you recommendations for orthotics. So you can try these over-the-counter orthotics that you can get, put them in your foot, see how it feels, walk around a little bit, and it should feel good. And if you're still having foot pain, if the over-the-counter orthotics aren't doing it for you, it's always a good idea to be seen by a foot specialist. So whether that's, a foot specialized nurse practitioner or a podiatrist, because we want to prevent any long-term problems like the bone spurs that we were looking at. And we have another question. Can you talk more about how nurses make their own foot care clinics? So just like any other business, you have to make sure that you follow the right regulations. You have to make sure that you have a venue that you're going to be doing this in. So if you're going to be doing it in the hospital, making sure that you have space and administrative approvals, seeing if they have policies for oversight and things like that. Otherwise, considering what other venues you want to do this in, whether you want to reach out to your local senior center, to churches, synagogues, mosques are really good community-based things. Wherever people are voting, they've designated, hopefully, those voting centers so that they're more easily accessible to communities. So that could be a good consideration of where to offer a foot care clinic. And then long-term care facilities, so like SNFs, LTACs, assisted living, even independent living centers are really nice. It's nice for the patient because they don't have to get transportation to wherever you're offering this. And it's nice for you because then you can just kind of line people up and just, boom, 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 get through a lot of people pretty quickly. So considering what venue you want to do it at, make sure it varies by state, really. So you need to check your state Nurse Practice Act and make sure that this is something that you can be doing without supervision. Some people need direct supervision of a provider, NPPA, MD, DO, or podiatrist, but some you don't. So check with your state Nurse Practice Act. And I would recommend, if it's not explicitly stated in that Nurse Practice Act, to reach out to your state board. You just email them and you say, hey, I'm looking at delivering foot care. What are there specific considerations? Does this require direct oversight for routine foot care? So routine foot care is like trimming nails. If you're getting into nail debridement, that's not routine foot care, if they have neuropathy, peripheral arterial disease, diabetes, that type of a thing. But when we're talking about routine foot care, a lot of state Nurse Practice Acts allow nurses to do that. The other thing you want to consider when you're opening up a foot care business is advertising. Make sure that people know about it. So you pick a venue and then give people some time to get the word out, whether you print out flyers or talk to a director of nursing or, what have you. And then you have to make sure that you have supplies. So they have to be sterilized and cleaned between people properly. So you either need to have enough supplies going in that you can sterilize them all at the end, or have a way, in between, but that's going to take much more time. And there are regulations, there are, laws and things like that on equipment. So you can look those types of things up online as well, but just make sure that you have equipment and that you know how to properly take care of it. Not just so that you're following the rules, but also you're protecting people. Like we talked about the paronychia and things like that. We don't want to be giving people infections or wounds or things like that. So make sure that you're being safe. We have another question here. Does soaking your feet help? So I did mention on my general foot care recommendations against soaking feet. I always say, this isn't the Oregon Trail. We don't need Epsom salts, like don't soak your feet, but that's because I'm primarily working with high-risk individuals. So I'm working with people that have wounds, that have high-risk feet, so they have diabetes or peripheral arterial disease or other forms of peripheral neuropathy. You can get neuropathy from other things than diabetes. You can get it from chemotherapy. You can get it from alcohol. There's an alcohol-induced neuropathy from people that have been, drinking large amounts of alcohol over long periods of time. And so, those are high-risk individuals, and we don't recommend that they soak their feet. Soaking your feet is going to increase your risk of infection. It softens that brick and mortar structure of your skin, and then bacteria and fungus can get in there. And when you're having a wound, that's happening in your wound bed, and it can get the bacteria and fungus into the wound and cause infections that way. So for those people, I do not recommend soaking your feet. For kind of, general public, that's up to you. I have seen people come from East Asia after doing the fish pedicures where they're nibbling on your feet to get your fish, to get your pedicures that way. And they've had huge sepsis, cellulitis episodes, having transport back to the US with wounds on their legs and feet and needing to heal these very deep wounds from that. So that's a at your own risk type of a thing. But for healthy people, getting a pedicure and soaking your feet in an establishment that is clean and following the rules for sterilization between patients is probably safe. So I think we're at time here. If I haven't gotten to your question, I'll be able to follow up via email and answer those for you. So thank you all very much for joining me. I hope you learned something and had a good time and you're interested in foot care and look into becoming a certified foot care nurse. So thank you very much.